Mario Kart has always held a strange place in the eyes of Mario fans. It's often considered to be the best Mario spin-off, and is by far the most popular if sales numbers are anything to go by. Mario Kart 8 is still to this day the best-selling game on Switch. But these games not having story mode don't really have much lore in them on the surface. Indeed, what lore exists is pretty few and far between when it comes to Mario Kart. But, by looking into the locations of different courses, I'm sure we can pad out a whole video. While we're at it, I'll also talk about 2 more NES racing games featuring Mario that I neglected to give their own videos, since the games are so small and unimportant that they really don't deserve their own slots in the list. So sit back, this is going to be a dense video, though not necessarily a long one, as we discuss Super Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo. First, I need to prove to a few of you that the Mario Kart games are actually canon. They're actually pretty consistent with other Mario titles, and it's clear that other, definitely canon Mario games are written and designed with Mario Kart in mind. Let's look, for example, at the Luigi's Mansion series. In the original Luigi's Mansion, the Verdant Plumber wielded the Poltergust 3000, which is assumedly the 3rd model in Dr. Elvin Gadd's Poltergust line of ghost-catching vacuum cleaners. In the sequel, Luigi's Mansion 2 Dark Moon, Luigi's weapon gets upgraded to the Poltergust 5000. The question then stands, what about the Poltergust 4000? Which would assumedly come between these 2 models. Was there any reason the game skipped that? The answer, in case you haven't guessed, comes from Mario Kart. Mario Kart DS introduced the new kart called the Poltergust 4000, which acts as Luigi's default kart. The reason the 4000 model was skipped in Dark Moon was because it already existed in the Mario universe as a vehicle. The fact that they specifically moved forward to the 5000 model shows that Luigi's Mansion 2 was designed with the Mario Kart series in mind. There are more examples I could give, but this one is probably the most straightforward and requires the least explanation. Now that we've established that, let's look at the game itself. Super Mario Kart is a racing game with 8 playable characters and 20 tracks separated into 4 cups. Starting with those 8 characters, all of these are people who have been introduced up to this point in the series. We have Mario, Luigi, Peach, Toad, Yoshi, Bowser, Koopa Troopa, and Donkey Kong Jr. Obviously, one of these things is not like the others. DK Jr. stands out as the only character in this game to not show up in the regular Super Mario Bros. Series, at this point being relegated to the Donkey Kong era of games. He also goes on to stop showing up altogether in a few years. This is also his only appearance in a Mario Kart game until Tour released him, but even then it was just a clear callback to Super. We'll get into it later, but DK Jr. is probably the most important piece of timeline information this game has. While he isn't a racer, Lakitu also shows up regularly in this game to pretty much run the race, a role he will continue to have throughout all future Mario Kart games. Moving on, the 20 tracks mentioned earlier can be further subdivided into 8 different locations the races take place in. As always, I'd like to thank Project Marioverse for doing a lot of the hard work in mapping out these tracks. That said, these locations are very approximate, as we only have so much to go off of due to the simplicity of these tracks and the lack of detail in the game. Some of this information was gleaned from reusing tracks in other games, and I'll show in-game footage from those titles when relevant. In the end, all of these locations are theories, so keep that in mind as we go through them. First of all, 3 of these tracks are very clear as to exactly where they occur. Both Choco Island and Donut Plains share names and physical attributes, with areas of Dinosaur Land shown in Super Mario World. So of course these 2 tracks take place in those locations. The 3rd track with a clear location is Bowser's Castle, which takes place in, well, Bowser's Castle. This is a location we've seen since the original Super Mario Bros. And will continue to pop up throughout the entire series. Even if Bowser has multiple castles in his realm, it's still pretty clear that this takes place somewhere in the Koopa Kingdom. From there, the tracks get a little bit harder to suss out. Mario Circuit is one that I've heard a lot of controversy about, but I've finally been convinced that it also takes place in Donut Land. Despite not sharing the name, when viewed in 3D, you can see that the color of the sky and the hills in the background match up with Donut Plains. So chances are, that's where this one goes. I've also heard arguments that Mario Circuit is near World 1-1, due to these similar looking blocks, but I'm not quite as convinced by that one. Vanilla Lake is one that initially seemed obvious, but quickly proved to be more challenging than I expected, and is the one of these tracks that I spent the longest placing. My initial reaction was to say that it took place in or near World 3 of Super Mario World, Vanilla Dome. Not only is Vanilla Dome the icy location in that game, but it also has a giant lake in the middle of it. But once you think a little bit more about it, nothing about this placement makes sense. You can clearly see clouds in the sky at Vanilla Lake, so it can't be inside the Vanilla Dome, which is an enclosed cavern. But at the same time, it can't be on the mountains above the dome, because those don't appear to be as snowy as the Mario Kart track. My guess is that they simply reused the Vanilla name to reference a snowy area, and chose a different second word, lake instead of dome, to imply that it isn't the same exact place. More likely, Vanilla Lake is a generic polar location. Nothing in this track seems to point to any other existing locations, at least to me. In its original appearance, and for a good while after, Rainbow Road is implied to be a rainbow bridge hovering in space. No ground in the background outside the racetrack, stars as far as the eye can see, but in Mario Kart 8, we got a very different look at the Super Mario Kart version of the track. Not only can you see clouds in the background, implying that this is within Earth's atmosphere, but below the track you can see fields with toad houses in them, implying that this Rainbow Road is not in space, but instead floating somewhere above the Mushroom Kingdom. Ghost Valley is meant to be a location filled with booze, but there are a lot of places that it could be. That said, the track Broken Pier and Super Circuit is both visually very similar to the Ghost Valley tracks, and has a remixed version of the Ghost Valley music as the main theme of the track, implying that they take place in the same location. And in Broken Pier's background, you can see strangely shaped rocks, which look very similar to the background from the Bowser's Castle, scene in Double Dash. This places Ghost Valley as a location in the Koopa Kingdom. Koopa Beach tracks all take place on different islands in the middle of the ocean, probably clustered together. Since they're in the middle of the ocean, there probably aren't many notable landmarks near them. The game also has 4 battle courses that, while not named, clearly share themes with other locations of the game. Battle Course 1 is in Donut Plains, Battle Course 2 is in Koopa Beach, Battle Course 3 is at Vanilla Lake, and Battle Course 4 is near Mario Stirkin. So just add those to your maps at about the same location as the main racetracks. Now with a racing game, there's only so much we can discuss, and when it comes to timelines, there's only so much we can say. It has to take place after Super Mario World due to the appearance of Yoshi in the Dinosaur Land tracks, but it can't be too much later than that since Donkey Kong Jr. is still around. So for now, we'll set it right after that game. If you want to play Super Mario Kart, it's available on Nintendo Switch Online. Alright, bonus round time. Mario Kart was not the first racing game to feature Mario and Luigi. That title goes to the Famicom Grand Prix series, released in Japan only on the Family Computer Disk System. The first title, Famicom Grand Prix F1 Race, released on October 30th, 1987, while the sequel, Famicom Grand Prix 2 3D Hot Rally, came out less than a year later on April 14th, 1988. The latter title was the game to introduce the vehicle known as Monster, which is pretty much the only thing from either of these titles to be referenced later. I was unaware of these games back when I was covering Mario on the NES, so I didn't make a video about them then, and honestly there's not really much to say. They were never released in the US, and currently there is no legal way to play them without a Famicom Disk System. The first game is a top-down racer based on Formula 1. The player plays as Mario competing against 19 other drivers, of which the best 6 are listed in the manual. All 6 of them come from real-world countries, implying that they're from the same tour Earth that we discussed in the NES Open Tournament video, rather than the Mushroom World. This aspect really dates the game because one of the racers, known as Panther, is specified to be from West Germany, placing this game before October 1990, when West and East Germany were unified. Which also means, yes, the Cold War is canon to the Mario universe. In case you ever wondered that, I guess. The second game is less of a racer and more focused on time trials, with Mario and Luigi trying to complete certain tracks within a time limit without destroying their vehicle. This game has no other racers, but has 3 vehicles, including the previously mentioned Monster. Neither game has much in the way of story, even in the manuals. The most we have is the information about the racers in the first game being actual Formula 1 racers. These games are a little tougher to place on the timeline, with so little story relevance. They probably take place before Mario Kart, since if that all had been set up before this point, then either we'd be seeing more racers from the Mario Kart series joining him, or Mario would just be racing there. Personally, I place these games alongside the other massive games where Mario had different jobs, such as Mario Cement Factory, Wrecking Crew, and others. He doesn't have any of the Super Mario iconography, the Mushroom Kingdom cast, or his regular outfit colors, making me think this is prior to Super Mario Bros. And that's the end of Super Mario Kart. I don't know what you expected out of a lore video based on a racing game with no story, but I hope you're all satisfied with what I pulled off. Next time, it's back into one of my favorite series, Sonic the Hedgehog, as we finally get to a game I've been promising for 6 months. Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and Knuckles. Until then.